Happy New Year, everybody. It's Anthony with Land Title. I came to bring you your Boulder County market update at the new year. So let's take a look at what happened last year and make some bold predictions here. The biggest thing I wanted to report is really just the fact that we had that huge drop in inventory. We usually don't see inventory drop this far off, but it looks like almost 40% of homes came off the market. So that being said, this is going to be an interesting spot going into the new year with a low inventory environment. And under contracts looked amazing last month. They're 37% above this time last year. So that's really going to help out going into the first quarter. Those lower interest rates are really helping buyer appetite at this point. So let's take a look at the inventory situation a little more in depth. This is inventory only. So if you look at it by submarket, it looks like really strong inventory came off the market in the Niwot, the Boulder area, maybe even into somewhere more like Louisville. But the vast majority of the county is a lot more like Denver Metro, and it only saw 32 to 35% drops in inventory, a little less of people just getting frustrated and waiting for another time, right? So that being said, use this information with your sellers because it could be a really favorable seller market here early on in the year. If you look at it by month supply of inventory, at 3.2 months of inventory, we saw a lot of concessions. We saw a more buyer favored market than we've seen in a long time. And now at 1.9 months of inventory, this might be a really good time to start putting stuff on the market. Your sellers will have a really good chance of selling, and they might actually be able to capitalize on a little seller favorable market time period that we're going to have for a little while. Now, what does that mean as far as, well, as far as the time on market? So if you look here, this is days in MLS. 62 days in MLS has been the slowest month in a long time. So active to under contract time in 62 days, it's gotten a little bit slower, but this is actually more normalized than we've seen in a long time. This is what we saw, 5 years ago, pretty consistently this time of year. So as things come off the market, as we kind of go into January, you're going to see one more month of low or high days in MLS, but then we're going to be off to the races pretty quickly into February, March, April, because with all that inventory coming off, it's going to reset those timers if people bring it back to market, and it's going to really drastically lower the time in MLS. So it's going to be more competitive for your buyers out there. This one is our price range slide. So I like to talk a little bit about this when it comes to, just the segments and how they're acting real differently, right? Because over the course of the last year, that price of money has really become cost prohibitive to buying those trade up homes. So those $1 to $3 million homes in Boulder County slowed down in the neighborhoods of 20 to 30% over the course of the year. That's a tough market to be in, right? So that's been a struggle. Now you saw a lot of inventory start to pile up in those marketplaces. Anything under $1 million, everybody was kind of forced down to buy in that area. So still relatively competitive. Definitely some drops in total sales, but that is actually going to heat up much faster than everywhere else. But there's just not enough inventory there. When we look at it by total inventory in each one of these segments, look at the month supply of inventory under 2 million even, right? They're going to be competitive this year. There's not a lot out there. And as you kind of rise up above that, we took 7 months of inventory off the market in December. We went from 17 months to 10 months. So that's going to make a big difference too. If you've got luxury listings, you got higher end listings that need to come to market, early on in the year could be a really good time for that because there's just not as many of them out there. If you're working with buyers and you're in the lower price points, you really need to be aggressive. You need to get out there early, right? Because it's really going to make a big difference for them before it starts to get ultra competitive. As rates start to trickle down this year, as everybody's expecting, we start to see an increase in buyers out there in the marketplace. The month supply of inventory, or I'm sorry, the days on market for this segment tells you quite a bit as well, because you can see the higher price ranges, those over $1 million price ranges, they're starting to have higher days in MLS, 100, 120, 90 at 3+ million. But if they are buttoned up listings, look what happened at 2 to 2.5 million last month. New listings came on the market. They were definitely really nice. People loved them. So they jumped in, they put them under contract quickly. It's not that people aren't shopping. It's just that there are less people shopping. So they're really picky if they are, right? If you look under $1 million, that kind of tells you the story, right? That's 60 days. That takes a couple of months to go under contract. And that was pretty normal because you were just kind of waiting for a buyer that matched your house. All right, so solds, this is the portion in this where we talk about how, maybe this is our low watermark year, right? 2023 is a lot like 2011, not a ton of sales. It was a tough year. We just saw a lot of divorces at land title and not a lot of trade ups or, we had a kid and we need a new home or, a lot of movement from out of state, right? So with those kind of necessity transactions, this should really be our low water mark going forward. Now, that being said, the NBA the other day released they expect 14% more sales in the following year. So in 2024, we should see a big increase. The sales from 23 or from 22 to 23 dropped 12%. So that 14% bump should give us a better year than we saw in 22. Now, in 22, it was very front loaded. It was very heavy with those lower interest rates and things were still going a little wild, right? And then the last half of the year was crickets by Q4. This is going to be an opposite year going into 2024. You're going to see it kind of come off to a start, maybe not even quite at a gallop, but closer to where we are right now. And then we're supposed to have a really big tail in the fourth quarter where we have a lot of sales. So the opposite of what we experienced last Q4. That being said, this is very stereotypical of transitioning markets. So really buckle down, double down on your marketing, double down on your calls this year, and you should have a really good year, right? Because the longer this year goes, the better things are, and the things are going to improve as 2024 moves on. Now, this is average sold price. This is a tough one to have a conversation around because in November, we sold 13 homes at $3+ million. In December, we sold 1. So the average sales price swing is really big, right? And this chart doesn't make a ton of sense when you look at it that way. That's why I've included the trailing 12-month percentage change at the bottom. That tells you over the course of the last 12 months, what is that average versus the previous year's average? So what happened between 22 and 23? Well, in a place like Boulder, very consistent, very flat, right? We had no price change kind of as a whole, right? The hardest market hit was Lafayette. It actually had a drop by about 6.5% in the average sales price. The market that favored the best in this area was Longmont, and it's probably because of its affordability, increase of 3% in average sales price over the course of the last year. So some good information to pass along to those buyers and sellers, or people even, just interested in the market. Now, this one kind of gives you that same idea of what happened in 22 versus 23. I don't really need to tell you this, but you knew 22, the beginning of the year, was pretty insane, right? So when we had that slowdown in 23, not to be surprised, we're going to enter into January with much better numbers than we saw January, February last year. So I'm very optimistic about the market going forward, which is a good sign. You can see it in this slide. The last slide I want to talk to you about is the percentage sold price to list price. Sold price to list price hit 97%. It was one of the lower numbers we've seen in a while, which is to be expected this time of year, but also 97% can be deceiving because the 97% number does not include price drops or price concessions. And at Land Title, we've experienced 40 to 50% of our deals coming in have concessions tied to them in some way or another. So it's been a very challenging time period for our sellers out there, and the buyers are really getting a good deal. So this is going to go away at some point. So get those buyers active and out there soon. So before they have to really compete in that spring market, there's still a good window for them to capitalize on what may have been the best bargain in real estate over the last, let's call it, few years, right? So this was definitely the low watermark. If you have any other questions, you need any other data, I'm always here as a resource for you. I'm Anthony at Land Title. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll catch you on the next video. Bye. Hey, it's Anthony Meisner with Land Title. Came to bring you your market update for the end of the year. Happy January. This is our Greater Metro update. If you ever need the highlights, don't forget we always leave the highlight reel here, so you can always come back and check out the presentation. And this is like your elevator pitch, right? Let's kind of get into the meat and potatoes of this. I think the biggest thing is the active inventory drop was pretty extreme across the metro area. We had a lot of stuff come off the market. Definitely a lot more came off of the market than what went on the market, and not as many went under contract as maybe you would have expected. But the nice thing is year over year, you're starting to see a little bit of an increase, right? So 6% more under contracts than this time last year. Those interest rates are really starting to help out just a little bit as we, get in the sub-7 interest rate market. So you can kind of see that, even though it takes time to change, we're starting to feel a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel in this market. The biggest thing here is when we talk supply of inventory, there are certain markets that have extremely shifted, right? And over the last year over year, everything's down that 18, 22%, whatever. But in some of these markets, like let's say Denver County, you had 37% of all listings come off the market last month. So people are getting a little frustrated, where if you were out in Elbert or Adams County, maybe only about 25% came off the market. Jefferson was the same way as Denver, right? High numbers, big amounts of listings that came off the market. So we are in an inventory shortage. I think that is the biggest takeaway from all of this, right? We've been in an inventory shortage for a while. It kind of ratcheted up throughout the third and fourth quarter, but at the end of the year, as everything kind of came off, we're back down to 1.4 months of inventory, of less inventory than we had this time last year. So that being said, be prepared for a spring market or a winter market here as we enter the new year, with more contentious deals. As buyers re-enter the marketplace at these lower interest rates, you're going to see more people in more competitive situations. So a lot of those concessions might start to go away, and a lot more bidding wars might take place as that ramps up, because sellers are going to take a little bit longer to figure this out, just like you saw in 22, where even though the buyers pulled back in that April-May timeframe, sellers just kept coming to market and that inventory ratcheted up quickly. Well, this is going to be the opposite. We're in that transitioning market going the other direction, where we might see more of a plateau in our inventory for a while, because until sellers figure out that it might make sense for them to move, and honestly, they probably have a different threshold than the buyers. So it'll be an interesting transition year. We talk about days in MLS. We had 45 days in MLS. That's active to under contract time. That's a pretty reasonable number still. And we hit that a year ago as well. But right here, this time of year, even pre-pandemic, this was pretty normal. So 45 days in MLS in the slow season is not a big deal, right? But it is important to set expectations. This is going to speed up over the course of the next few months. And especially with all that inventory coming off the market, even if they come back, they're all going to reset those timers. So it's going to look much, much lower than it did over the holidays. The other thing here, the one I really like to talk about, is our price by price point. So our solds and actives here by price point. You can see that this is just a really good one to use with those sellers or those buyers if you have them in the marketplace. You can see in December, year over year, the only segment that was really up in sales, we saw 1 to 2 million in increase in that activity. That was really exciting because that pretty much fell off pre 2022, right? I mean, that might have been the slowest time for that segment of the market. So you're seeing with that little drop in interest rates and those people that might be ready to pull the trigger, they were kind of waiting. Big increase there, even though the number's not huge. That was almost a 30% increase. The 500, 600,000 also had more sales than we saw a year ago. But the big thing, lots of reductions in sales still at the higher end of the market, because that cost of money is still prohibitive, right? So that being said, it looks like we're kind of starting to see some change, which is a good sign. The active units of inventory, you can see where it all came off, right? Across the board, almost a 30-something% drop, depending in every marketplace. Higher end, like that 1 to 3 million range, had more fall off the market than anywhere else. So what does that really mean? It means that as month supply of inventory dropped, we really saw a reduction at the higher end. So that 3+ million, we were flirting with 10 months of inventory at one point. Now we're back to 6. So we're getting closer to balance. This could be a much better time to start taking some of these luxury listings and putting them on the market early on this year, because look at 2 to 3 million. You got listings in the 2 to 3 million range coming. We're only at 3 months of inventory. If they're buttoned up, I mean, this could be an incredible situation for them to take advantage of. Then we get to everything else, and everything else, inventory shortage is probably the key going into this first quarter market. The other thing is days in MLS look really reasonable outside of the higher end luxury, that 2 to 3 million range in luxury, where we had 109 days in MLS. Some stuff came off the market. A lot got sold there, so that was a good sign. They probably got some really good deals up there, but that's going to all change now that we have this reduction in inventory, and you're going to see a flood of buyers coming into the market this year. Now, they're going to come slow and steady, but there will be, by fourth quarter, significantly more buyers than we saw last fourth quarter. So it's a really good sign. All right, sold numbers. Let's talk about the hard stuff here. This is one where year over year we were down about 6% in total sales from last December to this December. With those added under contract numbers, expect going into a January that we're going to see a really good January. We should have an increased number in sales finally. So we're turning the corner, right? That being said, not all counties were created equal. Broomfield County had the biggest reduction in total sales last month at 34%, and the biggest increase in sales was Elbert County at 7%. So that's fun. Average sold price. I've left both detached and attached in here so we can have a really good conversation about this. They're separate because I think it's important to understand the differences between the two. The year-over-year change, it can be a good metric, but it's probably not the best metric in some days. The good news here is you can see the seasonality in the market. We really have seen that. You saw where in 2022, if you look at the steep decline, we actually saw price drops. Well, this year it felt really more moderate seasonality, right? Maybe a little bit in the fourth quarter, but not too much. So this is a good sign. Year over year, we're up 4% in our sales price. We never hit the peak like we did in 22. So expect that to come in 24, where we kind of pick up all those losses that we had before. Now, if you look at the attached market's very different. It stayed very stable. We saw price increases that were a little too extreme. We didn't quite hit the peak again, but they've really bounced around because with the cost of money increase, it really forced people to shop into other segments of the market that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise when money was cheaper. So now that they can't afford as much, where do you get pushed? You get pushed into those townhouses or condos. And we've seen this stability in that marketplace at about 1% right now. That's a good sign. All these markets are going to really start increasing with that buyer demand. So if you wanted to buy at the bottom, or people were trying to time the bottom of the market, we probably missed that last month, but you definitely can still get on this wagon before, or get on the escalator before things start to go up again, because they will definitely do that over the next year or two. Now, sold units, you can see that we've really struggled. We've hit our baseline, year to date, 17% drop in total sales from this time last year. So the last 12 months, collectively, we had that much of a reduction. Now, the MBA is saying, the Mortgage Brokers Association is saying we should see a 14% increase in our total sales volume nationwide. Expect that Colorado picks up a little bit more than that usually, because we drop a little bit faster and we come up a little bit faster because of, just our affluent, educated society here across Colorado. Sometimes we are a little bit more resilient to some of these things. And so being more resilient, even though we've had quite a bit of a slowdown, people will come back to market really rapidly because of the demand and because of those people sitting on the sidelines. This one's an interesting one. So our sold price to list price, 98.58%. Basically, it's been competitive, right? I mean, we haven't seen huge price drops. If you saw a price drop, it didn't make it to this slide because price drops and seller concessions don't add into this figure yet, but we are seeing a lot of concessions. So people are paying closer to asking price, but they're also asking for money back on 40 to 50% of deals, not represented into the slide. So even though it seems pretty stable, we see that 400,000 or 500,000 range is where it's obviously the most competitive in the market. Obviously, as interest rates have come down, it continues to keep feeding people into that pool. That's kind of what's happening in detached. Now, on the contrary, the attached market, even though it's been very similar and the same, it's been very competitive at that $4 to $499 range and kind of around there, $399. But if you get into the higher end stuff, it really has been taking a bit of a discount. So that percentage sold price to list price, I think kind of keep this in the back of your mind. It's harder to have this conversation with your buyers right now, but it looks like they got the deal this last year. So as we get into the new year, expect this to rise. The normal seasonality is it rises all the way through that May or June timeframe and before it drops back off again. So we could have a pretty competitive year if interest rates cooperate at all, from what we can tell. This is Anthony at Land Title. If you have any other questions or need any other local market data, reach out to me. We'll catch you on the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Hope to see you soon.